one of the things that intrigues and concerns me about societal regression is the impact from people who are making a good deal of money functioning in a certain way. While I have nothing against her personally and find her program interesting at times, but the program Nancy Grace produces and stars in can generate an anxiety and statutes. I mean, talk about child focus. Continually looking at what's happened to children who've been lost, kidnapped, murdered, etc. And while I suspect that's a very small percentage of cases in the United States, it leads you to thinking that it happens every day. And corporate, and don't even get me started on the impact of corporations on societal functioning and regression. But how do you intrigue someone whose livelihood depends on their maintaining a functioning position, which is, in my opinion, destructive in some ways, unintentionally perhaps, to society? You know, it just intrigues me. And while I'm all for individuals doing what they can do in their own life, I'm not sure it'll ever reach Washington, D.C. or some of these other programs. So any thinking about that, I would find interesting.
Well, just one quick thought again. This is something I remember Bowen saying. At least I think I remember it. Years ago, maybe one of the embassy bombings or whatever it was, a young American soldier was killed. He was from Minnesota or something, and then they have on the news the reporter going to the home of the family and interviewing the mother and say, how did this make you feel getting this news? And Bowen said, that journalist is a warmonger. I thought it makes the same point. I mean, what in the media actually generates more intensity of feeling states that creates the very problem that's supposedly being addressed.
I would just comment on, I don't know if your question had to do with what's one person to do. And I think people are beginning to address that in this ripple effect. You're not going to change her, but the environment around her could change. I don't know how long that takes.
Dr. Barbello, when the comments were being made about parental over-involvement, I clicked very quickly to therapist over-involvement, and thinking about, you know, it was so obvious that it's fueled by the chronic anxiety. And it reminded me that the first impact I was aware of introduction to Bowen theory was what happened in my therapy sessions. That what I found is that if the anxiety leads me to over-involvement and trying to say to someone or do something to just calm down, is the shift was, my focus was, I'm getting anxious. What am I going to do to regulate or deal with my own anxiety? And of course, it was easier to do that in a therapeutic setting than it's been in a family setting. But anyway, I just wanted to share that.
Quick response again, quoting Bowen. I quote Bowen because I think it's important to reference him, if that's where I get the idea from. I get so many ideas from him, I wind up referencing him. But I wouldn't say him if I didn't think I agree with him. But he, I think it was his curriculum vitae in 1985, which was an annotated vita. He has a statement in there, the principal obstacle to the therapist's thinking systems is the anxiety the therapist has about fixing the problem in the family. I thought that was a very interesting way to put it, that could actually be an obstacle to thinking systems. And of course that changes the way the therapists approach
Louise, I wanted to ask you if I got it right. I think you quoted J.D. Calhoun as saying that the weak must migrate emotionally, physically, and in other ways to survive. And as you made that comment, I was thinking of Holocaust survivors and others too, that in my thinking, certainly many of them, maybe most of them, I don't know, certainly weren't the weakest. I think in terms of what they're having to leave their countries of origin to survive was an act of courage, and I don't see weakness there, so I was wondering if you might elaborate on that. Thanks.
Yeah, that was taken out of context, thank you. And it was in response, when Dr. Calhoun was talking about the three evolutionary imperatives that we have. One is power, one is tradition, and one is creativity. And in dealing with power and tradition, there's some who have not got those choices. And he helped you put the weak who didn't have a choice. And so, yeah.
While waiting for Father Price, I want to put in a question too. I may have got here faster. I stumbled upon a fascinating discussion at the break about indicators or predictors for levels of maturity, for immaturity, for qualities of leadership. And both of you, I think, described some qualities, characteristics that you would associate with higher levels of differentiation of self, greater capacity for leadership, or maturity. I'm not sure they're the same thing, actually. Some people with higher levels of maturity might decline a leadership position depending on the circumstance. But I wondered, if you had any summary of qualities or characteristics you've observed in the populations you've studied that you would associate with higher levels of capability, maturity. Just a quick, when I was, for 20 years, I was single after my early young divorce. I decided I had to ask a similar question of men that I was dating. And I couldn't just say, what is your level of maturity? And I darn well knew that the eye of the beholder would slant my opinion. And so I began to do 3 generational family diagrams within the first 2 dates. I would do them on napkins. And then I decided that they had to go home and meet my parents before a 5th or 6th day. I came up with all sorts of things that basically weren't effective. But I just wondered if you would have a more serious response to the challenge of predicting levels of maturity, capability.
I'm going to do a quick, non-serious response, and then think about this before tomorrow. But the one woman who I'm seeing in a country setting outside of El Paso had run into a gentleman who was not suitable, and she found it out the hard way. And so started talking about, did she know anything about the man's family? Nothing. She started interviewing the guy's families and getting to know them. Took her a little longer to find a name.
Well, you can do that when you're dating, but you can't do it when you're hiring.
Okay, beautiful.
But
I don't think I'm that.
I don't have a lot to say about it. The thing I'm surest of is in my own efforts as director of the Bowen Center for 20 years, the things that certainly knowledge and theory was, particularly triangles and anxiety and all that was extremely useful, but I still marvel at how much I had to learn by making mistakes. And as I look back on it, just an unsureness that I didn't recognize. And I don't know how you see this in somebody you're going to hire, but it led to being poorly defined in areas where I should have been much better defined. And then if you're poorly defined, it's terribly easy to fall into criticizing other people. And that certainly kills morale in a hurry too. So I just know for me those are things I had to learn. It took time. I think two areas particularly where people try to apply Bowen theory once they've heard of it is how to be a better mother, particularly with an infant. And I think, man, this is a slippery slope. And how to pick a mate, equally slippery slope. So with leadership, I don't know, I know it applies, but I don't have a lot to say about that.
Do you remember what Dr. Bowen had in mind about picking astronauts? That he thought theory could be used to select astronauts in effect.
I couldn't get a very good answer to that on the spot.
Early on, you had spoke about, kind of in a sense, taking the perception of the Bowen community, so to speak, as a rarefied world, and bringing that into less advantaged communities. Let me reverse the polarity for a second and express just what I've been able to take from your talk about migration and how I'm thinking that it can be applied to the northwestern eastern suburb in which I function, in which houses are popping up like crabgrass, and nobody is from there, right? So there is migration really is something that by your sharing of it in what we in a sense a much more dramatic or the extreme form of crossing a national border, but even within Northwest Houston, we have lots of migration within the middle class. And seeing a spectrum of results from, you might call failure to launch, the boomerang child, right, to extrusion. And also reflecting upon my own family history in, a grandfather who was, in a sense, extruded from a southern family in Virginia and went west, and migrated in the 30s to the Methodist Conference in San Diego, California, from Martinsville, Virginia. So which was, in a sense, lots of families have migration history, and so your presentation has provoked in me thinking about how to see that within the families that, in a sense, wash into the parish and wind up in my office in young, especially young families, be thinking about the impact of migration and cutoff and the distance that they've been experiencing, how that could be, and helping them think about that dynamic. As I also think about it in mine. So in a sense, failure, launch, and extrusion, and it's also made me very curious to, note to self, go back to Martinsville and see how those cousins are doing. Which, thank you for that reminder of work needing to be done.
Thank you for those comments. I think that migration and cutoff are not identical, not synonymous. So there's a study in that too. Thanks very much.
I have a question that's actually kind of an extension of Father Price's, but I was thinking about both of your presentations and the concept of the current social regression. And with migration and emotional cutoff, by virtue of being American, there was some migration in our families at some point, which very well in a lot of cases did, especially initially, but definitely initially were related to religious differences or whatnot that caused families to cut off. Is it possible that part of this social regression and I mean, this is an excessively broad question, but part of this social regression is a result of generations and generations of cutoff that has never quite been resolved.
Great study. You know, do you remember Dr. Willet's comment about one in Alaska and his invitation to present something there? See, I don't know if my memory is right. Oh my goodness. Dr. Kendall, where are you? Memory. But he had a very strong comment about the difficulty people in Alaska would have understanding theory because of their cutoff. And, you know, he was generalizing, but I think there was probably a lot of validity to it. So I wonder, too, about the population of the United States in the last 2 or 3 generations and cutoff. But it is a big study.
Ms. Honeywell.
I'm not a therapist, and but I am. My husband and I are mentors in our parish for engaged and married couples, especially newly married couples. And so we sometimes, you know, have the chance to do interventions, share experience, etc. But I was thinking when Sally mentioned the business of getting our own differentiation, our own anxiety getting in the way. That happens with volunteers as well, and in informal settings. And one of the things that I've realized is that, and I came up with, as I was listening, I was thinking so much success, quote unquote, in really helping couples that come to us, whether pre-marriage or post-marriage, is how, whether or not we as church people and as helpers and 50 years of marriage experience and all of that, feel the need to fix them. And that's our problem. And so it's about doing our work. Second, whether we really truly believe, and after all of these years of doing this, I do believe this, that they have the capacity to change, no matter what, and we do not work with higher, we're not in a parish where they're wealthy people, or very well educated people, and most of the couples we deal with are either Hispanic or first generation college, etc. But we believe, we realize they're the experts on their life, we aren't. And that our job is not to put our fixes or our helps in there, but to have a long-term view of whether we can whether we can support their strengths. And that's the third thing, is we come to believe that every family, every couple, no matter what, who we're dealing with, has strengths. And that their capacity to become better or improve or find their answer depends on their strengths. And our acknowledging those or our bringing those out. And just one quick example. When a couple that we prepared for marriage several years before called us, they were 9 months pregnant, and they didn't know where else to go, but they were talking divorce. And for once, somehow, you know, it was a good day, we were in a good place, I don't know. We just asked them to share their story. Come in and talk, you know, sure, you can come in and talk. What's going on? And they started telling, you know, extended family story. They were the first generation to be educated his parents lived in a place, in a house behind them, in fact, in their black backyard. The rest of the family were coming to them to all the answers. And at the end of his sharing this story, I said, "What do you see?" And he said, "We don't have any fences around ourselves, boundaries. You know, we've not taken any time for our marriage. We're just, you know, everybody comes to us, runs to us, etc." And then we have the grace and sheer grace to say, "Well, what do you think you could do about that? Because this baby's coming in a month and it's going to get worse." And we never gave them one answer. He figured it out just by having somebody listen to the story. We were invited to the baptism. We couldn't go. We were busy doing good work and all that. But a couple of years later, we ran into them again. They never followed through, but we knew they had stayed married. They arrived at church one day, happened to be at the time they were there. She came, she said, "I just want to tell you, we just had our second baby. We're teaching, we're teaching classes here. We're doing just fine, and thank you very much." And that's, just for what it's worth. It's so much about our not getting in the way and of doing our own.
Well, I thought it was awfully well said. Thinking about what I thought was one of the most important achievements of the NIMH project, when Bowen did the research with families with schizophrenia living on the ward, and disciplining himself, I think, through seeing things in a new way, to think of the family with schizophrenia, which is just a quantitative extreme of what we all do, as the problem, summarizing the problem, years of relating helplessly to each other and years of relating helplessly to the medical profession, with the medical profession moving in and taking over. And he came to the same conclusion, I think you did, that if he could be alongside the family without moving in and taking over, you were really doing the family a favor, no matter how much pressure they put on you about it. I think that was a terrific example. It also addresses, well, Bowen theory is such a long-term process. Who has time for that? And yet a great deal can be accomplished in an hour in just the way you described it. The other thing I wanted to comment on, when altruism became almost a household word as a result of sociobiology, appreciating and talking more and more about how animals would sacrifice themselves for the welfare of others, and they thought of it in terms of reproductive success. And Bowen again, well, there's such a thing as principled altruism, where the ability to go along with the other, to put self second in the name of a principle because you think it's going to benefit everyone in the long run, as a sign of differentiation. I would put that in for cutoff. I think we could have principle-based cutoff, making the same sort of distinction. Sometimes there is a reason to pick up and go. It's not always in my view, a reactive thing. And what those situations are often is the hard thing to decide, of course. But I just wanted to throw that one in too.
I enjoyed your talk on Louise. One thing I'm trying to visualize again is that slide that you had the data on of the two populations. And what it made me think about is that you actually don't probably need to do another study within that study. If you haven't done this, you might want to think about just analyzing it in terms of time to event. Because how long does it take someone to have those outcomes is probably going to show something that's interesting in the two populations. So if they had a miscarriage, how long did it take them to have that in one group versus the other? You know, all kind, and how long were they away from their family? Those kinds of things, even though it's a small sample size, because of the units of time, if you sum up the units of time in the two populations, you actually have more statistical power to look at some things like that. And that's what I was thinking about when I looked at it.
I don't know that I have the data, but it sure would be grounding for another study.
Yeah, I think the time to event, and if somebody's done that, I mean, actually, the time to event is probably a good endpoint for this kind of work. It's not just the event itself, it's how long did it take to resolve that or reach that. I enjoy it very much.
I just want to comment on what a nice room this is to be in.
Thank you, Dr. Kerr. I think this is a great place to have a meeting, and feel free to express your gratitude to those who deserve it. All I did was just get to choose it and camp out and set up this wonderful room and made the facilities available for us for this meeting. If there are no other questions or comments, it's probably a good time to break for lunch. And the meeting will resume at 2 o'clock. Here, thank you, with the afternoon presentations and a panel. Thanks. Looking forward to these afternoon presentations. And Dr. Miller's debating me that it's 1 till 2. If there are any housekeeping or detailed questions, let me hear them now. Yes, Dr. Barbella.
Where's the reception going to be held?
Thank you. The reception is right across the hall in what's called the patio. So you will have about 30 minutes to take a break and powder your faces or whatever the male version is. Anyway, the reception is at 5:30 across the hall in that lovely area. Dr. Miller.
Well, this is for me. If people, when they're getting up in the middle of a presentation, would not scoot their chairs back so it makes noise, I would appreciate it because it's distracting to me.
Remember that
They
song?
probably won't sound good.
You've
on
been
the
heard.
radio.
She stopped for a while, she gave me a smile, she powdered her face, I straightened my tie.
Thank you, Doctor. Your packet and the abstracts and the brochure have really good biographies. I bugged these folks to write biographical information and provide contact information so that it could be part of your packet. So I'm not going to do extensive introductions. I really would like each person to have their 30 minutes to use in whatever way they choose. And then there will be an hour panel at the end for discussion with the audience. If people choose to present 20 minutes and open it up for questions, that's up to them. And I've been looking forward to this afternoon and the presentations people will make about their applications of open theory in various projects and research. The first presenter is Dr. Jeff Butler.
I'm not sure I need this.
You need the lavalier.
Where's the lavalier?